Have you ever been told that you were pretty for a dark-skinned girl? I know that sounds like a compliment, but there is something deeply rooted within that statement. Something that we always didn't have the language to name. Today, I want to talk about healing from colorism. Now, firstly, let's define what is colorism. Colorism is the discrimination or preference of a person based on the color of the shade of their skin. And colorism, I would say, is the baby sister or baby brother to racism. Now, in order to understand colorism, we have to understand history, right? History is something that I know persons don't like to visit at times because they think like, oh my goodness, why are we going back? But in order to know where we're going, I think it's very important that we take a look back, right? And colorism is one of the things that stemmed from slavery and colonialism. So yeah, we're going to go back a little bit. So sit with me for a few minutes, as we explore where this all came from. So it came back, colorism came from generations ago, dating back from the transatlantic slave trade. Now, remember that slavery was where, we were taken from, the continent, of Africa. And we were brought over in these ships, packed like sardines across, from Africa over to the Caribbean, North America, South America, in order to work on these plantations to amass wealth for, the whites, right? And as a result of that, we were stripped of our languages, we were stripped of our spiritual practices, our belief systems, and all of the things that, made us who we are as a people. We were given different names and different systems and all that kind of stuff like that. We were stripped of our identity intentionally. And we see the effects of that even today. So what happened in those systems that was deliberately done was that white was the elite, right? It was superior. That was what we were made to believe, and that, it was God's will to enslave us. Because remember, it was the Christian people that had a 400 run of enslaving Black people. And so what happened was we were made to feel as if we were inferior. And so the Black skin was seemed to be, for the field, right? They would go and they would be out in the field. And then we started to have where the lighter skin were given like lighter duties. They were in the house. So the closer they were to proximity and power, it was more as if they were the preference. So you would have like the lighter skin Negroes, as they would call us then, Black people, whatever you want to call it. They would be like drivers. They would be like cooks. They would be housemaids. Okay. And so you kind of had this kind of hierarchy where, you're divided, so we're divided. We were divided among our own. And so with that division was the birth of colorism, where even in your own ethnic group or your class of people, they would have divided us. All right. And so that is really the history, how colorism really started. And to be honest, it never really left us. It never left us, even after slavery would have been abolished, a very, very long time ago, at least 7 generations ago. And we still have those undertones and, just the manifestation of colorism today. All right. So skin tone became one of the ways people were positioned closer or further to power. All right. We talked about how, the lighter skinned enslaved people were often given different roles, than darker skinned enslaved people, not because of value, but basically because, of control. And even after, like I said, slavery was abolished, those ideas never disappeared. All right. And even though this happened generations before us, it still echoes and shows up today. Now, I want to explore a little bit about how that shows up today. So, when people tell, women of a darker skin tone that you're pretty for a dark skinned girl, that's colorism. When you say good hair, or this one has good hair, or, we compare a lot the 4C, with the softer curls and stuff like that. All of these are undertones, of colorism. And then we also have the subtle messages that are basically, said. Like, I remember growing up, I would hear some women in my family say that I had narrow features. Now, I couldn't have been more than between the ages of like maybe 6 to maybe 8 or something like that in primary school. And I could remember like it being said that, oh, that one there, she has narrow features. And it isn't until like I'm an adult now that I'm trying to understand, or I do understand rather, what that actually means. It means that my features are not those that resemble, I guess, where, African, well, blacks, let me say black, persons would have like are known to have like a wider nose or, fuller lips and those sorts of things. And it was like, why do I have to be described? Like, why couldn't I have just been, Deandra? Why it had to been, oh, the pretty dark girl, or the one with the narrow features, you know what I mean? And there was also an undertone that, black people are, hair couldn't grow. So a lot of times I was defined by, having long hair, or asking if I had like Indian in my family growing up, because it was this tone of like, oh, you have a picky head. Like, if you were growing up and your hair couldn't go in like one, like in a ponytail or, whatever, then you had this undertone that you were less than or like not accepted, period. It was like being black was a problem, I could remember a lot of times growing up, this is a heavy conversation now that I'm talking about it, because you don't realize that these things were actually, we were battered, as a people just for the color of our skin among, our own. I remember in school, we had a teacher in high school, and, I'm dark skinned, but there's, different colors in the black community. We know that we have different shades of black, which are all beautiful in my opinion. But there was a fellow classmate that I had, and she was of like a deep dark complexion, right? Very, very dark, which she's absolutely gorgeous. But we had a white teacher when I was in high school, and he used to make these jokes, right? And one day he made the joke. He said, turn on the lights so that we can see. And then he said whatever her name was. And, the class laughed, right? Because we all know that she was of a darker, skin tone. But that wasn't funny. Now that I'm an adult, that was not funny, and coming from a leader, you know. It's one of those things that I look back now, like I wish I had, you know, I guess the bravery to make him accountable, because it was nasty, and it just shows that, you know, the systemic racism, that uh, colonialism, and you know, just the building of like that hierarchy, how you say it, you know, that, yeah, that class system, or that, you know, system within a system that they created for us, was just so well engineered that even up to this day we're still feeling the effects of it. So that's just a personal story on just how bad, you know, we as our own, we divide ourselves, you know, based on what they engineered, you know. And so colorism is something that, you know, was engineered, you know, by them in order for us to have a division, you know, among ourselves. And you know, the funny thing about it is, as I was growing up, my grandmother and my grandmother Beverly and my auntie Denise, from the time I knew myself, they always called me dark and lovely, right? And I always tell this story because I need people to understand the importance of words and the importance of creating our own self, you know, esteem and self-awareness, and our own inner voice, right? My aunt and my grandmother, my paternal aunt and my paternal grandmother, did such an incredible job of making me feel affirmed from by the time I think I was a toddler, right? Just a little backstory here so you understand. I never felt the need to have to go out in the world and look for validation or let somebody define who I was, because I was affirmed very, very early on by those women. They were drop dead gorgeous women. They were like a butter pecan skin tone. So I guess that would be like 2 shades lighter than me, but they were very, very glamorous, very put together. They were Black excellence personified. Okay. I mean, the skirts to the knees, you know, all the good things what life had to offer, they had, right? And they embody just this beautiful Black femininity, you know. They were, you know, very dainty women, very, very, very dainty women. And then my aunt was educated. She worked in the corporate world, you know. And so when they told me that I was dark and lovely and they kept saying it, it was like they understood something about the world that they needed to tell me before the world got to me. Now, I am the eldest granddaughter, right? And the first of my father's children and my mother's children. And so I was always a celebrated and anticipated child. So, you know, that added to me, you know, feeling, having that self-worth, you know, because I always felt very loved. And so I'm going somewhere with this, so stay with me. So for me, when they said things like, oh, you're dark and lovely, and I believed it and I internalized it because I was already celebrated. By the time as colorism tried to get to me, I was already affirmed. I was already secure in my belief system that, hey, I'm beautiful. So when my uncle, on my maternal granduncle, would come away from Freeport, Bahamas, and he would come to Nassau, the Bahamas, to visit my grandmother. And he would say, hey, Blackie. And, you know, I guess he used it as a term of endearment. But I remember my sister feeling so offended by it that she was like, her name is Deandra, because every time he would do it, and then he would like do a laugh. So it wasn't until now that I realized that it was learned behavior. And keep in mind, it was like 3 shades darker than I am, but it was probably projection as well, because, you know, at the time, you know, he would have been, I don't know, maybe in his 50s, 40s, or 50s. Yeah, about that. And so he grew up in an era where black, being of a darker tone, probably was really, really scorned, you know. And so with him saying that, it could have been projection. It could have been, I don't know what it was, but I just know that even though he may have been saying it as a term of endearment, he could have called me by my name, but he chose to use that, you know. And the fact that my sister, who was of a lighter skin complexion, started to get offended because I guess even in our youth, I guess she realized that, hey, like that's a derogatory, you know, thing that you're trying to do, like kind of something like saying the N word, maybe. I don't know. I just knew that, you know, I didn't fully understand it at the time, but I remember how it made me feel. It was a feeling of indifference. It definitely wasn't feeling of, oh, hey, uncle, you know? Um, and so, yeah, so it's like I was being described as opposed to being fully seen. So, but by the time as he came around, which is all this is in my primary school years and my youth, I was already affirmed by women who I valued, you know, their opinions, and they had already affirmed me that I was beautiful, you know, that I had the long hair, and you know, I already had my self-esteem and self-awareness, so the world didn't have any jurisdiction, you know, over my life. And so you know, I think that is very, very important. And I'm so happy that I would have had that experience with my grandmother and my aunt, and that they had, you know, they were so instrumental in giving me that, you know. It's so incredible to see that that was actually a gift, because so many persons didn't have that. I was sitting with, you know, a lady, beautiful lady of a darker skin tone, deep dark skin tone, and she shared something with me. I don't want to repeat it because, you know, she said it to me in confidence, but it made my heart bleed because it came from her mother, you know, that told her, you know, just the most hurtful thing that you could tell your daughter, you know, that broke her spirit really, really early on. And that's just one example. A lot of women speak to me, and a lot of dark skinned women. And I get the chance to mentor young girls as I'm an educator by profession. And there's so many times that my heart is in shambles because I have to literally take a mirror and hold it up to them and just let them know that they are so beautiful. They don't think that they're beautiful. Their parents are saying things to them. Boys are saying things to them just based on the color of their skin. Like, we're doing it to our own. We don't have the colonizers anymore having to tell us that, you know, we're black and ugly and undesirable and don't have to call us, you know, the N-word, because we're doing it to ourselves. They did it so well that we're doing it to each other. And so that was when I realized that colorism is something that we really have to heal from. Colorism is something that we truly have to heal from because it's inherited trauma. It was systematic, and we're letting, you know, our oppressors win when we continue to do things to each other to, you know, just discriminate our own race. Make us hate our own blackness. Why do we hate our own blackness? You know, and so, you know, with that being said, you know, we've come from great strides, you know, from early on, you know, but we still see it in the media today. You know, we have the Michelle Obamas and the Naomi Campbells and the lady from Black Panda, you know, that came with the black awareness and, you know, the Black is Proud movement and all like that. But we still have undertones of colorism where you have like persons, you know, having the preference of, you know, the light skin, you know, girls with the curly hair and all like that in the media as the lead, you know, even in most when you do have a black person that is represented. When I was growing up as a millennial, you saw the music videos and all of the black films, with the lead actors and the persons that were starring, being of a lighter hue, and so it sends out a strong message that, our dark skin women, especially, what, not desirable, are they the other, are they the afterthought, are they not the preference? And so even though we've made great strides, in the world with having more representation with women of a darker hue, those undertones are still there. And so we need to just understand that colorism was passed down, right? And it was intentional harm to us that was way before our time, that was given to us by our oppressors, right? And so it was inheritance, all right? And we have people that are our own, that were repeating what they were taught. I know a lot of us probably, our grandmother's time, especially, which would have been persons born like in the 1930s and grew up in the 50s and stuff, that segregation was a thing. And, if you were of a lighter hue, you could live life easier, and so they created that system so well that we wanted to be bleaching our skin, to be of a lighter hue. That's why bleaching today is such a phenomenon, and a lot of persons, really hate themselves. A lot of Black people hate themselves, and so they bleach their skin, right? Because they hated to be Black. Like, persons have made them feel like Black is a taboo thing, or a thing that is not desirable and is something to be hated. And I don't think we really understand that people are carrying beliefs they never stop to question. And we have to get to a place where we have to get to healing. And awareness is where the cycle begins to break. We have to be aware that it was trauma that was passed down. And so I have 5 ways that we can heal from colorism. And the first one is name what we were taught, right? The first step is awareness to heal from colorism. Let's name what we were taught, right? Being able to say that wasn't just a joke, when the school teacher said that thing to the Englishman who was our school teacher said that thing to my classmate, right? That was not a joke. And being pretty, you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl is not a compliment. This is conditioning. This was conditioning, all right? Because we cannot name, you can continue to carry unconsciously. So we're not carrying that over. We're not normalizing anymore that you're pretty for a dark-skinned girl. No, you're pretty, period. Not pretty for a dark-skinned girl, pretty, period. We're going to stop that, all right? And name what we were taught. It was internet. It was intentional that we were to be the exception. And we're not an exception in our own ways. Pretty, period. Number 2, rebuild your definition of beauty. If you're going to heal from colorism, we're going to have to rebuild that definition of beauty. Not borrowed beauty, not filtered beauty, putting filters all over, our skin to make us lighter. No, I know you're getting a lot of revelation now, but we're not filtering our beauty. No beauty based on proximity to whiteness. You're not going to allow people to tell us, oh, you have narrow features, you got the straight nose and the slim jawline and all these kind of things. No. Beauty that exists fully in our own image. Our skin is not something to overcome. It is our identity. Black is beautiful. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm talking about colorism and speaking like this. Black is really beautiful, and I don't know who told us. I don't know who could convince us that this sheath that is over our bones is ugly. Never. When I go out in the sun and I see what the sun does to my Black skin, I have pride. I feel like a goddess. I do not feel like I hate this. And even women and men, for that matter, of a darker hue, they are incredible. I'm sorry, Black is like this exotic beauty that is undescribable. And I could kind of see why the oppressors wanted us to hate that. They knew that that wasn't the truth. Are they insane? Do you know how pretty a black woman, especially black, smooth and just kept, and to me, it's if it was any race to be superior, oh my goodness, it would be us. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I don't know how they engineered something like that to convince us that our skin tone was ugly, but it's ludicrous. The different shades of brown, the melanin that protects us, that is adaptable based on like the weather that we're in, and that allows us to age so beautifully. You want us to hate? Listen, this is gonna make me mad. All right, it is so beautiful, and I need us to understand that we have to rebuild our definitions of beauty. Number 3, in order to heal from colorism, we have to change our visual environment, all right? Because your mind normalizes what it sees most often. So if you truly want to heal, if you're a woman that is still healing from colorism, follow women who reflect your beauty fully, right? Find women that representation is important. So you have to find women that, maybe look similar to you. Follow them, all right? Consume things that expand you, not shrink you. Protect your perception, because what you repeatedly see becomes what you believe is normal. So look for representation, right? Allow yourself to consume, maybe you want to get magazines and different things like that, or women that are in your community, or just women who you like, and, just consume more of that content, as opposed to things that, maybe that may be triggering to you, for you to compare yourself to, like, something that does not like reflect you, and who you are in your blackness. All right. And I want to really want to give you permission to think highly of yourself, irregardless of what people have said in your past, right? I need you to heal from those words. I need you to create new words and a new perception, new affirmations, for yourself. Because the reality is, forgive your parents, forgive the people that were in your life that just didn't know any better. We've come a far way now from what we were in the world as it relates to colorism. But, give them forgiveness, right? They didn't know any better. So that brings me to number 4, to reprogram your self-talk. Reprogram your self-talk, because you cannot heal with the same voice that harmed you. So, if mommy told you, you're black and ugly, right? Get your black self from around me. These are things that were said. And in order to heal from them, stop repeating inherited insults internally. Stop saying you're too dark for certain colors. Even I was victim to that, right? Like, I remember when neons was a thing in my adolescence, and I'm like, I can't wear like a neon green because that's too dark for my skin tone. Where did I learn that? And even up to now, like when I go to my nail tech, I'm going there today actually. I always get like neutral colors, and only now like I'm venturing out like with different colors. So one day she said to me, I said, I think that color is too dark for my skin tone. And you know what she said to me? She said, why do you hate yourself? And I'm like, girl, what? I don't hate myself. And so she was like, why would you say, like, who taught you that? What do you mean you're too dark to wear that, like, nail color? And then I thought, like, who told me that? Really? Honestly, me with my high self-esteem, and, everybody knows that I love myself. There is no self-hate here, right? And so I'm like, really? Like, where did I get an idea like that? And it just made me think, that there's something that was done psychologically somewhere that I'm not even aware of, that allowed me to say something like that. So we have to stop saying you're too dark for certain colors. Stop shrinking ourselves. Speak to yourself like someone you are responsible for protecting, right? And so we have to reprogram that self-talk if we're going to heal from colorism. And then lastly, I would say choose identity over validation. Stop outsourcing your worth to being chosen. Being chosen is not the same as being valued. And none of this changes overnight, but it begins the moment we notice it. So even as it relates to, men, right? This is where being chosen comes in. Because a lot of the times, like I know there's a famous celebrity that there was controversy about him because he would only let like lighter skinned girls in his section in the club, and like the darker skinned girls weren't even allowed, to come in his vicinity. And there was a big controversy about it. And so that is a matter of his preference, which is fine. But I need us, if we're going to heal from colorism, to choose identity over validation. It should not matter that somebody has a preference for lighter skin or whatever they have going on. That's fine. Don't let that define you. That doesn't have anything to do with your value. You know what I mean? Somebody choosing you based on their preference makes you feel unworthy? No. You have value with them picking you or not. So we have to choose identity over validation. We have to walk out into the world fully ourselves. And I know it's easier said than done. And it wasn't until I became an adult and I understood. But I come into contact with a lot of darker skinned women, and we have conversations, and they're like, I realize like a lot of us have the same kind of I guess experiences growing up, and I mean beautiful, fly, gorgeous, stunning, educated, just 10 out of 10 women that have, that those underlying themes of colorism, the effects of colorism, in their lives. So, and this isn't just, in the Bahamas. This is persons that I've met, women from the United States that said the same thing. There are women right on this channel that, would write in the comments things about colorism, as well as, on my TikTok, people compliment me all the time and, tell me that they feel like I'm an incredible representation as a dark-skinned woman. When I see women like the American influencer Jessica Alford, like doing her thing with her classiness, it just makes my heart smile, because representation is so important, and we were painted for such a long time being of darker hues that we're other. And that is insane. We're unlearning all of these things. We're healing, all right? We're healing. And now that we're starting to see the representation and beauty is being reframed, I think it's so good for the other young women that are coming up, that could now grow up without, I guess, deep traumas like the persons of our era would have faced, just for being Black, which is absolutely, so disheartening and so insane. All right, because visibility does not just inspire, it truly redefines what you believe you could become. So, with that said, guys, I just want us to understand that colorism was never just about our skin. It was about perception, all right? And perception can be changed at any time. So where we're writing, what our perception of beauty is, and we're not waiting to be accepted into the world. We are here. I hope this video helps with your healing journey. I think it's a conversation that needed to be had, and I wanted to have it for a very, very long time. It's one of the favorite things to do with my daughter, who was a brown skin little girl, is to compliment her on her skin tone and her intelligence, and just giving her self-esteem and self-assurance, and to build her so that just like how my grandmother did for me, she would already be affirmed before the world can come and try to paint who she is. So it is my encouragement to you today that if you have a daughter, you know, we're not telling our girls, oh, don't play in the sun, you know, before you get too dark. Those are undertones of slavery, right? And what was engineered for us to hate ourselves. And so we're healing now. We're well represented into the world. And I want you to be, if you're a dark-skinned woman watching this, or one of my beautiful students that I have the opportunity to pour into, I want you just to know that you're beautiful. You were always beautiful. And a lot of times you were the standard, right? And people try to oppressors try to rewire your brain mentally so that they could enslave you, right? Because once you enslave the mind, you don't need the chains. And so I just want you to go out in the world and be the best version of you, and always to move in a system of, you know, intentionality and you defining who you are in the world. You are not your skin tone. And it is always my desire for you to live a life of intentionality and abundance. Thank you for sitting with me, and I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.